37-year-old Joshua Kabatra now facing counts of rape and lewd acts with a child.
Daycare workers were from outside Midwest City. They brought their children to the play center at this restaurant. And while they were inside the play area, a 4-year-old went to the restroom that's apparently located inside the play area.
That's not what the child told the daycare workers, who immediately called 911.
You know, at this point, there's nothing to indicate the daycare workers did anything wrong. They were supervising the children.
Joshua David Kabatra. Take a look at the pictures, remember the face, remember the name. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit because the interesting thing here is the police chief says that the daycare workers did nothing wrong. They were supervising the children, right? This is what they call supervising children. Now, Joshua, he's disgusting. He's an animal. We know these kind of people out there exist. We want to figure out what can we do to prevent this, preventative measures. How can we educate people? But when you have a police chief standing there said that they did their job, they were supervising the children, they checked on the kids or the child, the girl, after 5 minutes of being in the bathroom.
Daycare workers checked on the little girl. After about 5 minutes, the door was locked until police say Kabatra eventually answered.
Raised his hands, said, "Hey, I'm just washing my hands," and walked out.
Somehow that's acceptable, right? I've seen some daycares, I've researched some of them, I've gone into them, you ask questions. A lot of these places, they'll escort the child to the bathroom, and that's within their own facilities. If you're outside in the public, you're not escorting those kids to the bathroom to make sure they get there safely, that nobody walks in there, to keep an eye on the bathroom. Why didn't they have parents there? Some of these field trips, they invite parents so they can be vigilant over their children. That's why I'm not into these field trips like that. You're not going to take my child out in public places and I don't know where the child is, open and free reign. Some people were looking at McDonald's. There was one lady, Rebecca, commented saying she knows it's not McDonald's fault. Why would McDonald's even come into your mind? We should be looking at these daycare people. Why haven't they mentioned the daycare, right? Why haven't they mentioned the daycare workers? Because I guess it's probably bad for business. Because I can tell you one thing right now. I would not take my child to that daycare. If this is normal within society, this is normal, right? This is what's considered supervising. I'm not blaming the parents on this. You know, the unfortunate thing with daycare, a lot of the places, they're really expensive. It's hard to afford. This day and age, mom and dad has to work. And, you know, I learned quite a bit when I've walked into daycares. You should research them, take your time, ask questions, notice the teachers' attitudes. If it's your first time visiting and you're a potential customer and they're treating you like crap, that's a sign to get out of there. Do they have cameras? How many teachers to kids are there? Do they have gates? Who walks in and out of that place? Is it locked? You know, do you have to have a security thing to lock in? I've seen places where they just let whoever walk in. There's people roaming in and out like nothing. I've seen other places where it's actually locked down. They have cameras. Do they have a sign-in sheet? Do they have a digital sign-in thing where they know who's coming in, who's coming out? The gates, are they locked? How high, how low are they, the gates? As a matter of fact, the sign-in, right? The sign-in stuff, the digital sign-in, do they have biometrics, right? Can you use your fingerprint? I know places that they take your fingerprint because anybody could just walk in there and sign in. Your emergency contacts, be very mindful of who you put your emergency contacts at. And here's another tip that I'll give you, and I got this from my mother. Show up randomly. Take a day off and come in the middle of the day when they don't expect you. Just show up and take a look. What's that teacher doing? Look through the window, however it's set up. Just watch and be vigilant, right? Watch what happens. Because there was another daycare that I've seen where I walked in to check out. Well, it was a place that my daughter was going to previously. And I walked in there and the rooms are connected, but they're separated, but there's a window in between. And I was looking through the window and I saw this teacher reprimanding a child, but not just a regular, like, hey, sit down. Like, you could see she was visibly like angry, upset. At one point, she was like doing that thing, like jerking in front of the child to scare the child. At one point, she picked up the child and put the child down hard. And she was like doing like this, like she was getting really upset, right? And then what happened was she turned around, she noticed that I was looking. And once she noticed that I was looking, she started going, like pretending everything's all good, and she put on a whole show. So I went and reported her because, yeah, it's not my child, but that could be my child next. And with all the precautions, I mean, you could be the most paranoid parent ever, this could still happen to you. That's the scary thing. You could take all the precautions out there and this could still happen to you. But when you see places like this that people are just, well, they were doing their job, sorry, but you were not doing your job. You know what I'm saying? Yes, it could happen to anybody, but somebody should have walked that child to the bathroom. Somebody, I would say, should have even been standing there by the bathroom to make sure nobody went in there. And then they checked on her after 5 minutes. How is that doing your job, right? How can this police of chief stand there, right? You're a man. You call yourself a man. I would think you call yourself a man. How is that supervising a child? Do you have kids? Would you say the same thing if it was your children that got inappropriately touched in the bathroom? Would you say, well, you know, they were doing their job. It's just this guy, which it is this guy. But the daycare workers were doing their job. And would you send your child back to that same daycare? Let me put it for you guys like this. A show of hands. Raise your hand right now. Me. How many of you, let's say you found this out, that this happened to somebody you know, a friend or somebody, a parent that you know, just even in the news. Let's say you're about to put your child in a daycare and you see this story in the news about a daycare worker that was with these kids and the kids went into the bathroom, this guy inappropriately touched them. Would you be like, yes, I'm gonna send my child to that place because the police chief says, and I guess some people agree, that they were just doing their job? Yes, I'm gonna send my child to that place. That seems like a good idea, because the problem is too, is if you don't call these acts out, I'm not putting everything on these daycare workers, because obviously this guy, he's an animal. But what I'm saying is they need to make some changes. They need to do some corrective stuff in their policies, because if this is what you consider acceptable, that's an embarrassment, and no parent should be sending their child to that daycare. No parent. That's the problem. We know these animals out here are running out in the wild. And make sure you remember this guy's face, because you got to think about it too. Do you really think this was this guy's first time to do this in a public place, to run it or rush into a bathroom when a child is there? Do you really believe this is his first time? Or maybe this animal has done this before? One final note, and I'll end off on my rant. If the media is for the public interest, right? Because they're supposed to be there for the public interest. Why haven't they mentioned what daycare these daycare workers work for, right? The field trip. Why haven't they mentioned that? Wouldn't you want to prevent other people's children from going to that daycare? If I lived over there in Oklahoma, I would want to know what daycare this was. I guess the media, just like this chief police, says that they have no responsibility and that they were doing their job. Anybody out there think that they failed on their job? Why not report it? The police chief, you're supposed to be there to protect people, right? You're supposed to be there for the citizens, right? You serve the citizens. The media is supposed to protect the citizens. How could you guys and all the media outlets not mention what daycare that is, right? People like us have to try to investigate and find out, because you guys aren't doing it. So it's not surprising that you find this supervision acceptable when a child gets inappropriately touched, and it's just like, well, there's people out there like this, and that's just what's gonna happen.